So now I'm going to take, there's still a little bit of that's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of information, but we're going to start to funnel the information down. I'm going to be talking about, starting a business in Canada, and then my other colleagues are going to, narrow things down a little bit with the taxes and getting your key personnel over here in Canada. So a little bit about myself. That's me a year ago when that photo was taken, and just pre-COVID. Hair was a little bit shorter, but still, we're still able to service our clients from as everyone's had to pivot. Some of the things about me, I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see that one of the, or two of the iconic trademarks that I was able to trademark in Canada is the I Love New York famous symbol and brand, and then a number of the DeLorean marks, which were made famous in the Back to the Future film. So normal disclaimer, which all of the presenters are going to be giving, is that these are general presentations and not meant, for specific legal advice for your particular situation. We'd be happy to talk with you, later. I'm going to start off with a quote from one of my favorite athletes, someone who's very inspirational. And he said, "If my mind can conceive it, if my heart can believe it, then I can achieve it." And we're hoping to bring you to the achievement point and give you some of the tools to conceive it and believe it. So here's the agenda. It's quite a big agenda that I'm going to take you through. And so we're going to go from, what are Canadian permitted entities, talking about different types of, branch office, subsidiary, affiliates. We're going to just touch briefly on LLCs in Canada, ULCs, different types of, asset purchase versus share purchase, some employment considerations for foreign businesses, the whole IP area, a little bit on labeling requirements, and a little bit on liability insurance. So let's dive into the permitted Canadian business entities. So generally, there's three types of legal structures for a business in Canada. We've got the sole proprietorship, partnerships, corporations, and within the partnerships, you can slot in the joint ventures, which are sometimes a very important way for a business coming into Canada to get a foothold. So sole proprietorships, we're going to touch on it, although it's one of the most popular forms of business structures in Canada. As Tyler was saying, there are certain incentives that the government of Canada has that are not available to sole proprietorship. So this will rule out this form of business for a lot of people, a lot of businesses on the call, but it is still worth mentioning. So the sole proprietorship is informal, it's easily created, but something to remember is that there is what's called the identity of business and person. And so that means that in the eyes of legal and tax authorities, the business and the operator are the same. And so there's an identity of money and responsibilities. There is some tax management that's possible for in terms of if a business generates a loss, that loss can be applied to other sources of income to reduce income gained. So that's why most part-time businesses are in fact sole proprietorships. The big thing to remember about the sole proprietorship is the personal liability of the owner. So partnership now is the second permitted type of organization, business organization. It's similar to the sole proprietorship, except you've got two or more proprietors. And oftentimes this is where we have joint ventures, because you can have two companies joining together in a partnership. So in terms of legal structure, there's many times the legal responsibilities are contractual, and so they will govern, what's the percentage of ownership, and then the percentage of ownership will also determine the responsibilities and liabilities. But again, it's a personal liability with respect to partnerships. So now, of course, now we have the corporation, which is a more complicated legal structure, but it's one of the most commonly sought for a business entering into the Canadian market from abroad. It's a separate legal entity, and so what, of course, the incorporation does is it creates a legal distance between the shareholders and liability, between the shareholders and the company. So incorporation, of course, creates a formal ownership of shares, and it produces that taxation and legal distance. There is some liability protection that is offered for because of the fact of incorporation. So the corporation's debts are separate from the shareholders' debts. Now, and just to remember that the company, the directors, the officers, they can come and go, but the corporation will exist until it's actually dissolved or wound down. So now I wanted to speak a little bit about the types of incorporation we have in Canada, and it's pretty much in two streams. We have the provincial or the federal incorporation. Those are the two basic streams. And for instance, many are familiar with, in the United States, you can incorporate, let's say, in California or New York or Delaware, one popular tax jurisdiction. But there is no federal incorporation. That's where Canada is different. But the legal status of a federal incorporation, as opposed to a provincial incorporation, is the same. There's no sort of enhanced legal status, but oftentimes there are some companies that will choose to have a federal incorporation. It might be because of prestige. It might be because of they're doing business in a number of provinces. So for the provincial incorporation, the costs do vary. The various government organizations, ministries have different incorporation fees, and so the costs can vary. If you are carrying on business in more than one province, you have to have an extra provincial registration for each of the provinces that you do business in, and those costs will vary. As well, for a federal incorporation, you will have to register extra provincially in at least one province. In Ontario, there is actually no extra cost on the extra provincial registration. So the government of Ontario doesn't charge you an extra fee, but in other provinces they do, and in some provinces it can be, go, for instance, in Quebec, a couple $100. In BC and Alberta, it's a little bit more expensive. There's a requirement to have an agent in place. And just a note that when you're incorporating, there is the requirement to file annual returns. Another quote from one of my favorite inspirations, Abraham Lincoln. He says, always bear in mind that your own resolution to succeed is more important than any other. So foreign corporations can conduct business in Canada in a variety of ways. And we're going to touch on some of these to introduce these concepts. Branch offices, subsidiaries, affiliates. So what is a branch office? That's oftentimes a branch operation is utilized when a foreign entity, a foreign business, decides that it's not going to set up a separate incorporation in Canada. They are going to use the foreign business to carry on business in Canada. And so the first step, as you see at the top, is that extra provincial registration concept. And so you have to be registered in at least one province in order to do business with your home country corporation. You do have to make sure that the corporate name is cleared and that there's no confusion between the name that you operate under and another Canadian corporation. The requirements, for instance, for the federal companies is a little bit more stringent, and sometimes the names can get rejected initially, but there are methods, there are ways to sort of show the government officials that, for instance, a confusing company's name, they might not be operating in the same sphere as you. So these are some of the things that we have to bear in mind. In Quebec, we have to make sure that we have a French name. So if you are going to be operating in Quebec, the French language requirements are extremely important. I am a Quebec lawyer and bilingual, so I am able to help, with the naming requirements, the French naming requirements in Quebec. So again, when you're doing a branch, you still have annual returns in some provinces. In Ontario, you don't actually have to do an annual return to the corporations branch or Service Ontario. And taxation, and of course Sabina is going to get into that in a bit more detail, but taxation is like a Canadian resident corporation. So now let's move on to the subsidiary overview. So we say here there's extra expenses because that means that you're creating a new corporation. So there's the cost of incorporation, the cost of preparing and filing annual corporate returns, financial statements, and income tax returns in Canada. You have to remember that with a Canadian subsidiary, you have to ensure that there's Canadian directors. So currently, for federal corporations, you do have to have a minimum Canadian director requirement, and also in Ontario. But that situation is in Ontario, for Ontario corporations, is scheduled to change with Ontario Bill 213. These are proposed changes to the Business Corporations Act, the act that has the statement that there has to be a minimum amount of Canadian resident directors. So that bill was enacted in 2020, but it's not official yet, and we're not sure how long it will take. Is it a question of 1, 2, or 6 months? Hopefully it won't be beyond that period of time. Now, of course, with a subsidiary, there are the corporate records, which have to be maintained. Annual resolutions have to be filed. And in Ontario, there's a requirement if you own land to keep a current land registry record in your minute books, in your documentation. And just very briefly about the tax situation, a subsidiary is taxed as it's a resident Canadian corporation, and a corporation in Canada is going to be taxed on its worldwide income. So the next one is an affiliate. Now, the difference between an affiliate and a subsidiary is really all about the percentage of ownership. So an affiliate, technically, legally, is a minority shareholding. So an affiliated company, it's a relationship with other companies, and so the parent company or the foreign company would own a minority share in a Canadian company. So again, with a minority stake. So I say here that there's a low negative stigma, and that sort of depends on the sector. But what does that mean is that in some sectors there can be a negative stigma about a foreign corporation owning, let's say, a treasured Canadian asset or something. And so this is where you know, you can have an investment with in a Canadian entity, but if you have a minority stake, then you're able to avoid, for instance, some of these negative stigma. So in terms of the tax overviews, there is the possibility of filing consolidated tax returns that combines all the tax liability of all the related companies. But that is something that has to be looked at with, obviously, with your accountant. Now, let's look at, you know, and this can be, these sort of tips can be also applied to the subsidiary. And so, you know, what's the advantage of being having an affiliate? It allows you to enter into a new market. With a company, with a Canadian company, a local company that might be experienced in a particular market. So it's a quick way to gain access to that market. And going the affiliate route can, you know, bypass the learning curve and substantial expenditure that comes with breaking into a new market if you were to start from scratch and establish a wholly owned company. One of the things about having an affiliate is that the brands of the foreign company, so to speak, your company in your home country, the brands are kept separate, and so that's something to bear in mind. Now, of course, you can always license your brand to the Canadian entity, so that is something that is possible to do. Entering into an affiliate arrangement can be an investment opportunity for a company in another country, and as well there can be synergies that can be created when two companies are coming together. So it's possible that because of these synergies that there can be efficiencies, and so, you know, the mathematical equation of 1 + 1 = 2 is not always the case. It could be 1 + 1 = 3 because of these synergies that are created. One reason why a foreign entity might wish to invest in a Canadian company is to control, for instance, the supply chain. And so if the foreign company has raw materials being sourced from Canada, which often does occur, then it's an opportunity to control that supply chain. And as well, the affiliation can help you to save on taxes. The affiliate structure, it can enable companies to receive tax benefits by shedding tax liabilities and receiving deductions. And of course, that's something that Sabina is going to talk a little bit more about in the next presentation. Now, what's an LLC? So an LLC is a limited liability corporation. This is a corporation structure that is set up and available in many countries around the United States. Many countries around the world, but particularly well known in the United States. And it's at this point in time, this form of corporation is not available in Canada. There's no statute in Canada that establishes an Ontario LLC or in other jurisdictions. However, you can register an LLC as an extra provincial corporation. So it is possible to have your, if you do happen to have a foreign LLC, it is possible that it can do business in Canada, just like we were talking before about the branch offices. I have mentioned here that there are LLPs, those are limited liability partnerships. Those are pretty limited. In Ontario, they're limited to lawyers and accountants who can form a limited liability partnership. And even foreign lawyers do not have access to the LLP. They will have to incorporate a different type of corporation, because it's only open to lawyers that are called in Ontario. So now there is another type of corporation which is available in certain jurisdictions, not in Ontario, and that's the ULC, which is the Unlimited Liability Corporation. So it's a corporation which is created by statute, and it's only available in at this point in time in Alberta, British Columbia, or Nova Scotia. And a ULC qualifies as what's called from the American purposes, as a disregarded entity. So there is, the pass, it's with a ULC. When if you're an American company, the taxation, it's permitted to pass through U.S. federal tax treatment of a proprietorship or partnership. So as the name implies, unlimited liability corporation, the ULC status requires that the shareholders are liable for all of the debts and liabilities of the corporation. And finally, a ULC will be considered a taxable Canadian corporation for the purposes of the Income Tax Act. So I do want to speak a little bit about asset purchases versus share purchases, but I'm wondering, Nathaniel, if you have any questions that are coming up in the chat about this specific, or if you want to just break it up a little.
For sure. So we do have two questions for you, Taras. And the first question comes from Sandro. And he says, hey, what about regulated entities such as a law firm? Sandro is an attorney in New York, Madrid, London, and Lima. He says that he's licensed in all four and has offices in three. He's not a member of the Canadian Bar. And his question is, can he open a federal partnership in Canada, keeping in mind those facts?
Okay, so it's absolutely a great question. The legal profession is regulated provincially, and so there is in Ontario the possibility of setting up a foreign legal consultant, and so that is open to. And there are requirements, of course. You have to prove to the Law Society of Ontario that you have, that you're qualified as a lawyer in your home country. You have to get insurance, appropriate insurance, and you have to limit your practice of law to the law of your home jurisdiction. In terms of setting up, a partnership with, let's say, a Canadian entity, a Canadian law firm, it's possible, but again, you have to make sure that you have this recognition. If you're in Ontario practicing foreign law, then you do have to make sure that you abide by the rules of the Law Society of Ontario. So that's one thing. We can certainly talk about drill into that a little bit more another time or later.
Thank you, Taras. The second question comes from Jeff, and his question is whether Bill 213 will obviate the need to incorporate in other provinces. for example, British Columbia, if there is no resident director. He says, if so, that is great news.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I don't think we can give a blanket answer. You know, that's often the case with lawyers, because if your reason for, let's say, choosing British Columbia is because of the no foreign director, no resident Canadian requirement, then you'll be drawn back to Ontario as a jurisdiction to incorporate, and that's certainly one of the reasons why the current government has brought that bill into place. And so now it's just a question, once it's in force, which we believe should be in, as I mentioned, about 1, 2, or 6 months. Then once it's in force, then yes, it does obviate that requirement, and you might decide that the British Columbia Corporation is not as attractive. It might be a little more complicated, and so you might then choose to come back to an Ontario corporation.
Great, thank you, Taras. You can continue now.
Okay, thanks very much. So the next sort of shifting is asset purchase or share purchase. And, you know, let's talk, because sometimes you might come in to a jurisdiction, you might set up your corporation, or you might purchase another corporation. And that's what we mean when we're talking about a share purchase. So share purchase means taking over a company. You can take over 100% of the shares or any degree of shares. And if you take less than 50%, then you are a minority shareholder. So you know, the target company is what we call it. It's a separate legal entity, and you will be purchasing all of its assets. When you purchase the shares of a corporation, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly. The assets, liabilities, and obligations, as well as any historic problems that might come with the corporation. But then also, if you're purchasing a brand which has good recognition, then you get all those benefits as well. You get the benefit of continuity. The relationships, the contracts, they're still in place with employees, suppliers, customers. And so there could be some obligations in terms of notifying customers about change in control, leases, that sort of thing. But for the most part, there is that continuity that stays in place. And for a seller of shares is taxed on the proceeds of the disposal of their shares, and so those those are obviously tax considerations. But we find oftentimes that a purchaser wants to purchase assets, and a seller wants to purchase or wants to sell their shares, and so there is a bit of a tension between the two, and it's not always a simple answer, and sometimes it depends on that whole supply and demand issue. It's how anxious is the purchaser wanting to purchase, let's say, the particular assets, and they might be feel compelled by the vendor to purchase the shares. So asset purchase, it's you're purchasing a specific business activity, and I've got this expression here, you can cherry pick assets, and not everyone might be familiar with that expression, but it's basically, that concept of a tree and being able to pick the specific assets that you want, and you're able to have the employees, let's say, that go with that particular sector of the business. Bear in mind, there are some transfer formalities. You want to make sure that the assets are properly conveyed or transferred to you. And one of the reasons why people do an asset purchase is to isolate themselves from, let's say, historic risk factors. Now, let's switch gears a little bit about and talk about some employment considerations for foreign businesses. So the question is, what does a Canadian company, and I've focused in on Ontario, planning to hire in Ontario, need to know? Now, I will say that the regulations, the laws are very similar from province to province, but they do have sometimes slightly, different names and things like that. But we're going to focus, for the sake of this topic, this conversation, on Ontario. So there's the Human Rights Code, and a non-Canadian business planning to hire employees in Ontario should be aware that we have a particular sets of workplace laws, and so foreign businesses can be sometimes surprised at how different our laws and rules can be when it comes to, for instance, the employment relationship. And so any business looking to employ people in Ontario, not just Ontario, but any province, should first get advice from qualified counsel in that particular province, so that they can, fully understand this system of laws, that govern the employment relationship. So the Human Rights Code. Ontario employers are governed by the Ontario Human Rights Code. And the code provides that every person has a right to be free from discrimination and harassment in their employment on the basis of, and this is quite a list, the basis of their race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, age, record of offenses, marital status, family status, or handicap. And so what do employers have to do if there's a particular issue? They do have to accommodate. Employers have the ultimate responsibility for maintaining an inclusive work environment that is free from discrimination and harassment, and where everyone's human rights in Ontario are respected. Now, the Employment Standards Act is one of the most important acts in Ontario with respect to the employment relationship. It sets out minimum standards regarding wages, hours of work, overtime, vacations, public holidays, leaves of absences, which could include pregnancy and parental leaves. It also deals with termination of employment and rights to be reinstated, among other things. So non-unionized employees will be covered by the Employment Standards Act. And I think it's important to point out that oftentimes people who are, for instance, more familiar with the United States, they are familiar with the concept of at-will employment, and that doesn't exist in Ontario. And it is important to bear in mind that there are termination requirements and notice requirements. And notice can be given either pay in lieu of notice, or you can give working notice. And that's a tip that a lot of employers don't always avail themselves of or realize. So if you are going to give a termination notice, and you work out what's the appropriate notice. The Employment Standards Act has the minimum notice, but you can always provide a working notice as well. So now let's go on to this aspect of the common law and wrongful dismissal. So as I said, there's not a recognized concept of employment at will. And at common law, which is the judge-made law, it's not unusual for judges to routinely award notice periods in the range of 1 month's notice for every year of employment, and possibly more. We do see in COVID times that can sometimes now be a little bit more than that sort of old rule of thumb. Now, the Employment Insurance Act is another act that has to be considered. It is a federal law, and there are benefits for employees who are unemployed for a variety of reasons. The statute provides for benefits that can be payable even during periods of illnesses or pregnancy leave, for example. And what's important here is that both the employers and the employees contribute premiums to this insurance scheme. And it's very important to remember as an employer that you cannot shift your burden of paying this amount over to your employee. Now, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is another important act which we see in Ontario and in other provinces. It requires the employer to establish a health and safety committee, and violation of this legislation, it can be prosecuted as a provincial offense. There are not only fines, but individuals who are found guilty of offenses under the Act can face the additional risk of incarceration. So it's important to always stay on the right side of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, or sometimes you might hear it referred to as OSHA. There's also the Workplace Safety Insurance Act, which is different than the previous one, and it's formerly known as workers' compensation. So this act creates a system of compensation for workplace accidents or injuries, and different than, for instance, the employment insurance. It's the employer contributions which fund the workplace safety insurance scheme 100%. So employees are not required and cannot be required to contribute. Next, in Ontario, we have the Pay Equity Act. And this act in Ontario is aimed to address and redress systemic gender discrimination in compensation for work which is performed by employees in what are called female job classes. So it's based on the concept that employees should be paid equally for work which is of equal value. So you can have somebody in the office or somebody in the warehouse, and those jobs are different jobs, but they should be paid equally if the work is of equal value. And so for any employer with 10 or more employees, they must establish and maintain compensation practices that provide for pay equity. The last one that I want to highlight is the Ontario Labour Relations Act. And this is for unionized workplaces, if your employees are unionized, but also if you have employees that wish to form a union. So that's sort of covers off the employment issues. Mother Teresa says, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. And that's certainly something that we have to maintain, is our discipline. One of the areas that I find people don't always maintain a discipline about is with respect to their IP. IP, trademarks, patents, copyrights, industrial designs. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that with sort of just an overview. So, I'm not going to, just for the sake of time, I'm going to go a little bit quicker, but a trademark registration in Canada at this point in time is for 10 years. It does give you, priority. So the priority is with respect of applications from other jurisdictions. When you have a trademark registration, you have an assumed right to exclusive use of the trademark across Canada. So Canada does not have a province by province registration like they do in the States. In the States, they have the federal USPTO registration, but they also have a state by state registration, which is possible, although a little bit not so frequent. But in Canada, it's only the federal registration, which is good because then you have protection all over Canada. Having a trademark registration gives you an enhanced ability to enforce your trademark. And so what that means is that with a registered trademark, you're able to have access to the Federal Court of Canada. Now, without getting too much into the details, there are the different levels. There's federal court, and then there's the courts of each province. The problem with the courts of each province for litigating and enforcing your marks is that the judges of the provincial courts, I'll call them, they have to deal with everything from family law, criminal law, property disputes. Whereas on the federal side, you have judges who are specialized, and so that's definitely a great advantage. So you have this enhanced ability to enforce. You're able, with a registered trademark, the borders, the Border Patrol is able to monitor and prevent counterfeit goods from coming in if they're not registered trademarks. So there are these advantages. Trademarking is a public notice. It will facilitate licensing, especially useful for foreign corporations. Licensing your, and we discussed that a little bit, licensing your trademarks to your IP to your Canadian corporation. It does become a corporate asset. Having a registered trademark also can facilitate the fight against cyber squatting in domain name proceedings. And that's in particular with respect to the .ca domain. Something to remember and is that if you have a mark registered in Canada, for instance, in the English language, then with a registered trademark, you do not have to have a French equivalent. I don't necessarily recommend that you not consider the French language, with respect to your trademarks. It's very important, and especially myself being a Quebec lawyer, I do feel that it's important for, Quebec is a huge market, an important market, and it's important to respect that market. And one of the hallmarks and signs of respect is having language and labeling in that province's language. So, we've got as well a good, robust patent protection system in Canada. We do find that many corporations will choose to register only in the United States, and that can have some advantages. But to be fully protected, you'll want to protect as well your patent in Canada. And as we say here, it's the protection of any IP is only for Canada. In the difference in patents is it's a 20-year 20-year patent protection. So also there's we have to consider copyrights. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but copyright, it's the creator. So there's an automatic protection from creating a work, creating a performance, and it's generally for the life of the creator plus 50 years. There's of course some other nuances there. And then the last form of IP protection is industrial designs, and so that protects the unique appearance, for instance, the shape of a kettle, the shape of a car, the design of it, and that entitles one to a 15-year protection. So I do want to very briefly touch on consumer packaging and labeling. So the Consumer Packaging and Labeling Act in Canada, it is a federal statute. It's actually a criminal statute. And so it's important that when you're coming into Canada, and if you're selling goods which are subject to the Act, that you do maintain, accurate information. So this Act requires that prepackaged consumer products bear accurate and meaningful labeling information to help consumers make informed purchasing decisions. And the Act prohibits false or misleading representations, and also sets out specifications for mandatory label information such as the product's name, the quantity, the dealer identity. Also in Canada, it is a requirement to have bilingual labeling. So now this is not necessarily a legal topic, but it's an important starting business in Canada topic, which is the idea of business liability insurance. And really, it's all about liability protection. So business insurance provides financial protection should a claim or lawsuit be filed against you or your business. Now, business insurance is not required to run your business. However, it can protect you from costs associated with claims, lawsuits, legal fees, medical expenses that could threaten your business. And so, business insurance is there to protect you against unforeseen events. There's many types of coverages, which really depends on your type of businesses. Your type of business, the size of your business. So some of the common types of insurance, let's say, are commercial general liability insurance, professional liability insurance, otherwise known as errors and omissions. There's product liability insurance, commercial property insurance, cyber liability insurance, and then for your directors and officers, there's what we call D&O insurance, directors and officers insurance. Now, the cost of insurance, of course, you have to get a quote. It does vary across the type of industry, but it can be relatively low cost. For instance, for a small to medium-sized business, the sort of rule of thumb is that you could anticipate spending about $650 a year on a $2 million general liability policy. Again, don't quote me on that because it's going to be up to your insurance broker to make the ultimate quote, depending on the various risk factors, the business size and location, your years of experience, annual and projected gross revenue, the number of employees, any claims history, and that could be relevant if you're buying, for instance, shares of another Canadian company. So that covers off the business insurance. That covers off the presentation. And I want to leave you with one last quote from Nelson Mandela, which is, "Vision without action is just a dream. Action without vision is just passing the time. And vision and action can change the world." I just want to also leave you with this last slide about our team. You're going to be meeting Sabina Mexis next, and she's part of our team. You've met Denise Robertson, and we have a full team of people, as Denise has mentioned, who can help you with the various aspects of your business. So I'll ask Nathaniel to take it back, and I'll stop sharing if there's any questions that have come up.
Thank you, Taras. We have one question from Mitchell. His question is regarding in the employment considering employment context, and his question is there a preference for hiring Canadian citizens in these organizations, possibly?
Okay, I think that's that's a great question, and there's no strict requirements to hire Canadian citizens. And so this is where we're going to be talking in the last presentation from Joseph about bringing over, people from various countries. And we talk, all the time for instance, with technology companies that want to bring people from United States, India, UK, Pakistan, and as Joseph's going to get into, each of those, you know, there can be different different requirements, different issues that have to be overcome. But per se, you know, to answer that question, there's no requirement, you know, in terms of a minimum number of Canadians that need to be hired. Although I will, you know, say Joseph is going to talk about the different types of permits that are available, and in some of the permits that were available before, there was a requirement to create jobs. So Joseph, I think, is going to be able to, you know, to handle that, because that can be dependent on the type of visa that you have, or that you see, you know, that you're seeking to obtain, let's say, as an entrepreneur if you're coming over. But we have different kinds of people on the call, different corporations, so the answer can be a little bit different.
Thank you, Taras. Thank you for that valuable information, and I'm sure everyone has learned quite a bit.